What's up, Pirates, Priori, and Sinspire attendees? Welcome back to the Fantasy Files Podcast, the podcast that wastes hours of your life that you will never ever get back. We are your co-hosts, Spencer, Gabe, and officially Sam.
Yeah.
Many of you have probably seen her on a large number of episodes recently and wondered, what's going on there? Well, after the last Potter Watch episode, we decided to make her an official part of the crew. We're still figuring out exactly what this looks like, but you can expect to see her on many episodes to come. So please welcome Sam in the comments and check out a video that we've just posted introducing her a bit more. That aside, today we're talking about Red Seas Under Red Skies, the second book in Scott Lynch's Gentleman Bastard series, and we'll be going into full spoilers pretty much right away, but we won't be spoiling the third book because Sam hasn't read it yet, and I swear to God, if anyone spoils any information whatsoever about Sabbatha for Sam in the comments or anywhere else,
don't tempt him, man.
What Locke did to the Bondsmage will look like a mercy compared to what I will do to you.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, that being said, here on the podcast, we're not shy about our opinions, and we don't want you to be either. Tell us what you think about this series or anything else down in the comments or over on our socials, which are all linked down in the description, as is our Patreon, where you can get exclusive content and access to episodes live as we record them, like Shad is right now. He's in here saying hi.
Yep.
So, first of all, we did it in the video that we just recorded, but welcome to the crew, Sam. We're super happy to have you here. And looking forward to recording a lot of episodes with you.
Me too.
So, sometimes at the beginning of these episodes, we talk about what we've been reading recently. But I have a feeling that all of us were slammed just to read this book. So I don't think we've read anything else.
Nothing but this.
Yeah. But I guess one thing I did forget to mention on the Harry Potter episode last week is that Gabe and Chris and I all have tickets to go see Through the Gryffindor up in Seattle in September. This is a podcast where they talk about Harry Potter. They go chapter by chapter. It's the Super Carlin brothers, if anyone's more familiar with them under that name. But yeah, we're super, super excited for that. So that's a bit of an update of something that's upcoming. We'll try to record what we can. I don't know what they'll let us record, but maybe we can make a little bit of content out of it. But looking forward to that. I think that's the only real piece of news that I have. I don't know if anybody else has been watching anything or anything like that. I haven't really.
Anyone watching The Boys?
No, but
No.
I have been telling my old lady that is something that needs to happen quickly.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, there's just not time, man. Like, it's hard.
know.
Like, I've been stuck in bed for the last, 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
But I know if I watch it without her, I'll get an earful, and I don't want that. So I haven't been
Right.
watching it.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
Yeah, The Boys is something that I've been meaning to watch. I made it through season 2, I think, and I just never really made it on to the rest of it. But I've wanted to. What I have been watching is House of the Dragon season 2. Anybody?
Yep.
Dude, this show is so good. You watched season 1, right, Gabe?
Yeah, but I never even finished season 1.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it just
Oh my
wasn't.
God.
It's not that I didn't like it or anything. It was just probably not the best time to start it. Too much going on.
Sure.
But I would totally watch it again, just like I would watch The Boys again.
Yeah.
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 It's so amazing. Season 2 so far. There's a new episode today as we record this, and I'm so excited to watch it. Last week's episode was so crazy, and I love that they're doing it week by week as opposed to releasing everything and you just like binge it, because I love the anticipation week to week of like, oh, I want to see like what happens next, and thinking about it throughout the week and stuff.
For any anime fans out there, I started it a while ago, and there's only a couple episodes out, and so I stayed away from it for a while. But as of now, season 1 and 2 of the second part of Bleach are out completely, and so I binged the crap out of. It's called Bleach 1,000-Year Blood War, and I binged the crap out of that, and it's like probably one of the best animes I've ever seen.
Really?
Yeah,
that's cool. I've been wanting to.
If you Google Bleach, so Bleach is like, the first part of Bleach started like way back in the early 2000s, I think, or something like that, and it's massive. I mean, there's like 700 episodes.
Yeah.
Huge. And so I way back when I watched every single one in order. All the episodes took me years, it seems like.
Yeah.
And then we've just been waiting for this to come out, and it came out like what, a year and a half ago. And so they just finished the second season. So yeah, it's awesome.
That's so great. Yeah, I knew you were waiting for that for a long time.
Yeah, long time.
Yeah.
Well,
I've been. Oh, good.
Well, I was gonna say, have you watched The Bear? Do either of you watch The Bear? The new season just came out.
That's another one I've been meaning to watch. I don't know too much about it, but I know everybody puts it on the same level as like Barry or like those kind of shows.
Okay, so it's like funny, like comical,
like
funny,
dark humor.
Okay, dark humor, yeah.
If you like,
but also drama.
Restaurants for decades. It feels like decades. It was at least 10 to 15 years I worked in restaurants as a bartender.
Yeah.
So like it's very real in the sense of the restaurant culture for the people working there. But it's also just beautifully written, and they have these episodes that you watch similar to Atlanta, where it's not always part of the main plot line. It'll be like a bottleneck episode for one person's like outside story that gives you more context to like why they are the way they are. You just walk away from it and you like think about it for a while after. For me personally, that's really hard to find.
Yeah.
In TV or movies.
I've heard nothing but good things about The Bear. I've really been meaning to watch it. Shad says that he has been rewatching The Expanse. This is a show that I've been meaning to finish as well. I finished the book series, and I hated the final book. I love The Expanse. I love like 99% of the books of The Expanse, but that final book was such a complete shit show. But I've wanted to watch the series really bad. And then he says he also just rewatched the first season of Justified.
Justified, what is that?
It's I think it's like a cowboy show, like a badass cowboy, or like sheriff. He's like
Western,
a sheriff.
2010 Western. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
like that.
That's one that I've been meaning to watch as well, because I think the ghoul from Fallout is the same guy from Justified.
What about Yellowstone? You guys ever watch Yellowstone?
No,
I have not.
No.
I've heard good things.
So good.
I've heard really good things about it.
Shad, have you seen Yellowstone?
Yeah, let us know, Shad. But yeah, I've also last thing I'll talk about that I've been watching is Dark Matter on Apple, and this is like such a good, like, I love the book Dark Matter by Blake Crouch.
Something I've read or no?
Yeah,
no,
you've read it.
Like Dark Matter, the Blake Crouch one, where
okay.
doesn't know which one's his real life. I didn't know there was a TV show for it.
Yes, it's on Apple TV. It's so good. It's exactly like the book. And the
Coming
writer...
from Spencer, that is the highest praise.
Yes,
my girlfriend,
exactly.
Elizabeth, who may watch this because she watches a lot of ours, would agree wholeheartedly with you. We've gotten sort of into arguments about it where I'm like, I'm okay with the show and the books being different. I can look at them as two separate things.
Yeah, that's what I do. Yeah.
She can know any little thing and she loses her mind. Elizabeth, I love you if you're watching this, but she cannot stand it. And I'm like, it doesn't bother me.
That's how Spencer is too, though, you know?
Well, I think what Dark Matter does so well is that Blake Crouch, the author of the book, he is the head writer on the show.
Nice.
And so he's literally writing the show. So anything, like even if he were to go a different way, like anything he does is technically canon.
Yeah,
because he's the author.
Yeah.
They'd be like, yeah, it's totally fine because you wrote the book. So
right, exactly. And I think what he does really well is it stays exactly true to the book, like exactly, but also it shows you another POV that you don't get in the book. You don't get Jason 2's POV, the other Jason that's like going with the first Jason's family and like trying to take over his life. You get his point of view and you see the scheming and the stuff that he's doing the entire time. And it's so goddamn good, you guys. It's so good.
I'm definitely gonna watch this.
Yeah, I very, very rarely text my mom and say, hey, you need to watch this show that I'm watching. But this was one where I texted my mom and I was like, you have to watch this show because it's that good.
It's great.
But all right, so let's talk about Red Seas Under Red Skies. I'm going to give a final spoiler warning from here. We're not going to spoil the third book, but we will be spoiling the second book. So if you have not read it, now is your time to either be okay with spoilers or leave for now until you read it. But yeah, this normally I say like you really don't want this book spoiled for you. I don't think there's anything major in this book that's like, oh, like no, you have to like be there for this twist.
Kind of like its own little thing,
Yeah, it's kind of just like a little side adventure.
Yeah.
And I love that so much. So let's get some general thoughts from you guys. And we'll start with Sam because she's probably itching to talk about this book.
Only because I really enjoyed the book from the beginning. I was like, this is an interesting plot, they want to rob the vault, and then they're playing the two overlords, against each other. I thought that was crazy. But then when you bring in the whole pirating element and all the identities they're using, I, by the end, was having trouble keeping everything straight. There were so many characters by the end, and I don't know. I'm really torn on it. I feel like I'll figure it out by us talking it through, but initially I am a little just confused by the end. And you saying that there's not really anything you're missing actually kind of rings really true.
Yeah, I think Red Seas Under Red Skies, it doesn't do the same thing that Lies of Locke Lamora did, where Lies of Locke Lamora you're getting like this super gritty, like twisty and turny scheme, and you have like these two storylines in the present day timeline that are working together, and like by the end they all kind of intermingle and become like this one big twist at the end. And this one, I've always described this book, and for the most part the third book as well, as Scott Lynch kind of being like, okay, I gave you a great like first book and I gave you these amazing characters. Now I'm just going to take those amazing characters that I wrote and throw them out into the world and see what they do. And like we're just going to let them go on adventures because you already love the characters. So I'm just going to put them in the sandbox and watch them play. And I think that is what is so interesting about this book. I think when I first read it, I was a little disappointed that it didn't have the big like con that you could follow and like had so many like twists and turns. And at the beginning of the book, I thought that that's what Requin's whole thing was going to be, that there was going to be like this big con that you're watching the whole time. And I was like, oh, a casino is a great backdrop for this. Like, that's such a good idea.
Like an Ocean's movie,
Yeah. And then when the pirate thing came into play, I remember initially being like, I like the pirates. I don't know if I like these two things together. Like, I don't know if I like the pirate storyline and the Requin storyline. Like, those don't seem to like mesh very well. And I think that still holds true. And I think what I had to do over time is take a step back and be like, okay, it doesn't really matter. Like, I'm not going to get the same thing that I got from the first book. I'm not going to get that like super in-depth, like twisty turny storyline. I just have to like sit back and enjoy whatever these characters are doing in any given situation. And I think that's why I like this book so much. I think this book has possibly more humor than the first one. Like, whenever I think about this book, I'm like, it's the funny book. Like, there's so many moments in this book where I am just laughing out loud. And I love the pirate storyline so much. Doing this reread, I forgot how long it took to get to the pirates. I like, in my memory, I was like, oh yeah, you go through like a few chapters and then you're there at the pirates.
Oh.
It's like at least halfway through the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pirates, and I'm like, what the fuck is he talking about? How are pirates going to play into this story that I'm reading already? I'm like, I have no fucking idea. And then I don't think I really got to it until this morning.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Oh shit. That's crazy.
I agree where it's like, you have them saying they're going to rob Requin, and then they have the who's the other guy who hates Requin?
Stragos.
Yes. He's brought in, and you're like, Archon. Okay, it's going to be a double play, a double con. And then it brings in this whole pirate element. And I was like, I feel like we've got enough going on right now.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, there was.
Understand him kind of pinning three groups against each other, and what's the actual con here?
Yeah, it definitely gets a little convoluted.
Yes.
To where at the end, even on this reread, you know, they're on the ship and they're going for the last time back to Tel Varrah to go to the Spire and to go to Stragos. And then they introduce the Priori as like another like middle ground. And so I was like, okay, the Spire, the Priori, Stragos, and they're just going from place to place to place. And even this time I was like, this is a bit too much. Like, this is a little, this is this is kind of a lot, you know?
Yeah, trying to kill him, that, you know, yeah. We were the whole time we have no idea like who these other people are that are also trying to kill him, and then it was explained, and I was still kind of like, okay. It didn't add a like, oh my god element to it for me. I was just kind of like, all right.
Yeah, I wish it had been foreshadowed a little bit better. Do you understand who the Priori are?
Like the government?
No, so Stragos is the government. So there's two governments that were in play in
Stragos is like he's the Archon of Tel Varrah, right?
Right, yeah.
Which is like, let's say, the president or the mayor.
Yeah, he's like a duke, or like a baron, or he's like a duke. And then Requin is kind of like a baron, and he's like kind of a criminal, not exactly, because like this casino is legal in Tel Varrah, but he's kind of like a badass kind of guy, and he's on the council of Priori, which is the government that was there before Stragos came in.
Got it. Okay.
So Stragos came in and he kept the Priori around, but he won over the hearts of the people by taking out the pirates.
I remember that now. Yes.
Years before. And so that's why at the end, Locke, he brings in the Priori to deal with Stragos for him. He's like, why don't you guys just kill Stragos and I'll distract him? Yeah. And they come in as like his secret, like his eyes or whatever, the Archon's eyes. And then they go to double cross Locke, and he's like, I got a letter from Requin. And he's like on the council of the Priori. And he's like, you wouldn't want to piss him off, right? And they're like, no, we don't want to piss Requin off. So that's kind of the politics of what's going on there at the end.
And they do say something like, we don't want to create another war hero that we then can't control.
Right.
So
yeah,
it's all clear.
Martyr.
Right. What about you, Gabe? General thoughts for the second book as compared to the other two?
Yeah, I would say this book kind of feels like there's more losses than wins.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah.
And so that was kind of an interesting thing. I really liked that side of it, but it seemed that every time Locke and John thought that they might get the leg up, no, they did not, and they were fucked from the start.
Yeah.
And so that was cool. And of course, just like you guys were saying, Pirates was awesome. I love that whole entire kind of arc, little storyline out on the sea, and the Sinspire's super cool. Having this gambling elitist people that they're trying to rob, especially when the book starts, because it's like they're fucking tricking people that never thought they could be tricked, right?
Right.
And so that's pretty cool to see.
I love that one of those first scenes where they're gambling against the two older ladies.
Yeah.
And the narrator is basically explaining there is no way to cheat at this game.
Yeah, it's impossible. Yeah.
And then you find out later as they're walking down the street, they talk about this powder that they were putting on the cards.
And when you drink alcohol, it makes them drunk really fast, and that one lady passed out. Yeah. No, it's cool, man. So
he figured it out. You don't cheat the game necessarily.
You cheat the people,
person.
It's social engineering as well. Yeah, exactly.
I like that. I thought that was great.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It is cool. It is cool.
There was another guy. Sorry, real quick.
No,
there was another guy in that same thing when Locke is explaining to Requin how he's cheated people.
That scene was awesome too.
Yeah,
it was so good. And there was one guy that he was saying we found out that he had an allergy to mustard seed or something.
No, yeah, or it was it was lemon. It was lemon.
Yeah.
Lemon.
And he's like, I forget exactly how they did it, but he's like, we just had lemon everywhere and it messed him up. I'm like,
lemon
that's
rind
so great.
in the arm.
Yeah.
Lemon zest over the coattails.
Yeah. It's so great.
Yeah, but this is an awesome series, man. Even though, like you kind of said, this is kind of maybe a not really standalone, but just kind of its own little generic kind of side adventure. It was still awesome. So
yeah, this is and this might surprise a lot of people. I know I share this opinion with Murphy Napier. This is my favorite book out of the series so far.
Really?
Yeah.
I love the second book so much. I think there's so many great moments between Locke and John where in the first book, you see their friendship, but you don't really see it tested. And in this book, you see their friendship just tested and tested and tested.
Yeah.
And even one of the chapters I read either last night or this morning was when so in the prologue you see a flash forward to this, but eventually you see the full scene where Locke and John are getting accosted in an alleyway or something, and these two guys have crossbows on them, and Locke and John pull out their crossbows, and John eventually turns to Locke and he's like, I'm turning on you, give me your crossbow.
Yep.
I'm gonna shoot you if you don't give me your crossbow.
I'm working with them, you're no longer my friend.
Yes, exactly. And this is after they had just had a big fight on the ship and had all this other turbulence, and Locke is really questioning Jean's loyalty to him, and he's like, maybe he is screwing me over. And it's this moment where it says Locke is shaking, handing over his crossbow, he never thought that this could possibly happen.
He was looking for signs, where are the hand signs, and he never saw them, and that was even scarier because of course he's going to give you signs if he's faking, why wouldn't he?
Right. And John, after he pulls his stunt and he goes back to the guys and shoots him in the head.
I fucking gave you the signs.
Right.
I put him in the air. I fucking did it.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, it was so good.
Yeah.
And he's then he says a line that crushes me every time. And he's like, and even if I didn't, did I need to? Like, do
Yeah.
you, like, in your heart, do you honestly believe that I could ever betray you? Like,
Yeah,
is
you're
that
right.
really what you think?
That's
Yeah.
fucked
And
up.
Locke is just like, oh my
And he's
god,
like,
like,
when would I have had the time? When would I have
yeah,
had the
Yeah,
time to
exactly.
cross
He's like,
you?
I've literally been with you every fucking second.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
It's just this moment of like, it's showing it. I think it's showing the fear that Locke holds inside him, because
Yeah,
that's kind of a theme
totally.
throughout this book
Totally.
too, where Locke is seeing Jean with Esri, and he's like, maybe he'll leave me behind for her. Like, there's a couple times where he's kind of like jealous over her, and then even at the very beginning, I love the whole part where Jean is going around and creating a new gang.
Yes.
And he
did.
finds like
I
this
love
young gang, and he walks in and he's like who's the biggest baddest motherfucker in here? And then he like beats him up, and yeah, it was just such a great thing. And there's a fantastic quote. One of my favorite quotes is he takes one of the kids, like they're talking back to him, and he takes one of the kids and like grabs him by his shirt and his pants, and he rams his head into the wall, and he says, added penalty for damaging the wood of my wall with your head. It's just like,
Yeah.
it's just so good. But Jean comes back and he's talking to Locke. He's like, yeah, I got this gang, like we can turn them into real thieves and stuff. And Locke is all, he's in his moody phase,
Yeah, he's
right?
just,
Like
he's like moping around. He's like,
Right.
Yeah,
nothing
exactly.
I can't figure it out.
When he
Right,
says, like,
and-
what, you're trying to replace them already?
Yes.
Like, Paolo Galdo, like, that was
Yeah.
fast.
Right. He's like, are you trying to replace Caldo and Galdo? He's like, what about me? Did you find a new Locke? And so there's kind of this growing, not resentment necessarily, but this
It's a fear. It's a fear.
yeah, this fear that's growing that Jean is going to leave him because Locke has fucked up too many times. And you see that all come to a head with this crossbow scene, and that's why I really don't like that that Scott Lynch spoiled it in the prologue. I don't know why he would do that. It seems so, because reading it in the prologue, it's like, oh, obviously this is going to be fake, or obviously this is going to be. But if you had only seen that scene later after seeing all this turmoil, you as the reader would be like, oh shit, maybe he is going to screw him over. Like maybe this is for real.
That's true. That's a good point.
I don't know why Lynch did that for the prologue, but overall I think the scene works so well because it is this moment of like, there's been all this turmoil and there's all this fear on Locke's side, and it's like, maybe Jean is like, maybe he is screwing Locke over. And then when you find out that he was faking the whole time, it's like, oh, of course he's not. Like, of course he's not screwing Locke over. It all works together so well. I think it's so good.
I liked when he's trying to get Locke sober, and so he like locks him in the room, and then he puts all the boxes and crates up so he can't get out, and he's like, come on, the old Locke would have been out in like 2 minutes, and he sets him off, and he like robs so many people that they have.
That's my favorite part of this entire book.
Yeah.
Hands down, my favorite part of this entire book. When Locke comes back with his baggie full of stuff, and he pulls out this or it was some fancy brooch or something.
Yeah.
It's like, I took this from the king's wife in their bed while he was asleep.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, fuck yeah.
And then they just look at each other.
And he's like, we're going to have to leave. Like, we have to go out of here. We can't stay here. And he's like, give me apple mash. And he's like, oh, the old apple mash trick. All right.
Yeah. Which that was also like really great as well. The apple mash, how to get out easily.
It was cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I really liked it. But I also he got me a little too much with Jean starting another little gang because I kind of wanted to see where that was going to go.
I know.
I did too. Totally. I
was feeling so good during that moment, like, oh, like he's actually got like a crew together. He's teaching them, and they're getting better, and they're working together better.
And he even tells Locke that he's like, I've been training them.
Yeah.
Yes.
For weeks.
Well, and he says how the guys that he had initially like beat up, the tough ones, then came to him. That's how he knew he was reeling them in when they came to him. Advice on, can you teach me some more, like fight moves? And I was like, oh, I love this. Is this what the book is going to be about? Them like starting their own, and they're the teachers,
and then Locke fucks it all up.
Disappointed that that's not what the story.
Yeah, I know.
I know. That was another thing. Another, I guess, negative for me with this book is there was so many great ideas, and I think that Scott Lynch just didn't know which direction he wanted to go with it. So at the end, he kind of decided to go with none of it. And I think it would have been a great book idea to start a new gang. That has the downside of feeling a little too similar to the first book. However, I think that would have been a great idea. He had a great idea with the Sin Spire, and I think like Locke and Jean working their way up through the whole Sin Spire could have been an amazing book. I think that would have been so good.
Totally. Like you said, be like an Ocean's Locke,
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And like, then it made the time jumps in the beginning of the book, like the back and forth, a little confusing for me. Trying to keep like the story straight.
I remember that my first time reading this series, I also, not even in this book, but in the first book too, I had trouble with the time skips.
Yeah. It's definitely the hardest part for most people, and I think this book does it differently than the first book, where it, instead of going back to their childhood, it only goes back a couple years.
Yeah, little ways,
and it's just showing like how they got to where they are now. And so it has the added negative of it's just like too close of a timeline, and so you never really fully understand what's happening in this timeline and what's happening in the previous one. And I think that's the downside of that. But in the third book, he does go back to doing the child timeline and the present timeline.
Well, what was the whole point of, does it come back up in, say, book 3 of when he went to go get the chairs, we had this huge chapter on like the board games where they use real humans and whatnot, which I did find fascinating, but found it had no place in the overarch of the whole entire book. And I kept thinking about it, waiting for it to come back up, and because it didn't, that annoyed me. I was like, why did we get all of that then?
So that's just something about this series, is that Scott Lynch will put in these little bits of world building that you may never hear about again. But especially on a reread, I think you'd appreciate them more, because they don't necessarily connect to anything, but by the time you get to where you're in love with the series, when you go back through, you're just like, yes, just give me more. Just like, give me all of the world building, give me all of the things. And so I've read this book a couple times, and I found that I enjoyed that segment significantly more this time, because it got me thinking, I'll just say, no, we don't see anything about it in book 3. But Locke says, he's like, I could come back here and rob these motherfuckers for everything. And so I'm like, I wonder if in like book 4 or 5, like if that would be a plot where he would come back to the Wall of Amusement and just run game on them.
And
take them for everything. And so I'm like, that would be a super cool book. I would love that. But yeah, I think, going back to kind of what I was talking about earlier, I think that he doesn't really pick one thing. Like, I think it would have been an amazing book to do the pirate stuff and then go on, like, have Esri live and have her be part of the crew going forward. And that would have been an amazing, like, third book or something.
I didn't see this coming. I did not see her death coming.
Right? Me neither.
That was something I just did not expect. So that was a really tough read.
Yeah, that's a scene where I tear up for sure. Like, that is so brutal after spending so much time with her and Jean and them like falling in love, and just like these promises that they're making to each other for the future, and then for her to go out just like grabbing this sun basically and just like setting on fire. She's just like a human torch running across the deck of the ship. It was just like, Oh my God, what a brutal way to go out, and for John to see it.
It was
Yeah,
such a gentleman bastard act.
Right.
totally. And I mean, she was, saving them, right? Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
she was like, so that in and of itself, mind you, the death is gruesome and shitty, but the sentiment of her saying, "I don't care, like I want everybody else to live," and
Right.
doing what she did was cool. Mind you, I know it was very sad, it sucked,
Yeah.
but it was, I guess, nice to see somebody dedicated as she was to her morals, her values.
Well, and Jean was going to do
Yeah.
it, and she pushed him out of the way so she could.
Yeah.
Yep.
Saving him as well. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
he's never
Yeah.
gonna forgive you for this, though. You
I
know what I
know.
mean?
Yeah.
Like,
And I love the forethought of her pushing Jean onto Locke, because she knows that if she has to get rid of Locke, otherwise Locke will stop her
Yeah.
from doing it. I'm like, oh man, it's just such a it's such a moment. And it's all because of the stupid physiker lady with the crossbow.
Yeah.
She like comes out and shoots the guy in the back, and they're like, what the fuck?
yeah.
And she's like, I didn't know what he was holding. I didn't know what that thing was. And everyone's just like, oh my God,
Wasn't
you
it true to
fucking
you that
idiot.
we weren't taking him out?
Yeah, like, oh God, stupid lady. Every time I read that, I'm so furious at that stupid woman. But yeah, so what else do I have for general thoughts? We see in this book that the boys are truly devoted to their god. It's not just an alibi or like a con to them. Like they really believe in
Really
the
a
Crooked
priest
Warden.
of the Nameless 13th.
Yeah. And they're like doing funerals and all this other stuff.
The biggest thing they do, I mean, is the offerings. That's where you see it. That's where you see their devotion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is in their death offerings.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting that we see it maybe like halfway through the book or whatever, when Caldrus dies, like the guy that's initially teaching them how to be sailors and stuff.
So who killed him? Was it the guy?
No, he just got sick, I think, right?
Yeah, it was either that, or I kind of wonder if Stragos
set them up for failure kind of thing.
Yeah, like I wonder if he gave Caldrus like a fake antidote.
Oh, antidote. Oh,
yeah.
Interesting. That would be hard to believe though, because the Archon wanted them to sow discontent, right, in order to boast his navy, or in order to greater strength than Tal Varrah. So why would he sabotage his own mission?
I don't know. That whole thing I've never been able to figure out. I've never been able to understand if it was something from the poison, or if it was something like he just had like a heart attack or something.
Well, I mean, he was sick though, like for a little while. Like he was feeling shitty and he was not feeling great, and then all of a sudden he was dead.
Right.
But I guess you're right. It's not said what happens, so I guess I don't really know.
I didn't know if I just missed it, or if it was just one of those things that wasn't tied up later.
Yeah. I think it just wasn't tied up very well, because I definitely didn't. I couldn't find any like reasoning for it in this read through. But when he does his funeral, he's like, I don't feel comfortable doing this funeral in the name of Iono. I have to do it in the name of the Crooked Warden.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh wow, he's really like into this Crooked Warden.
He's really
thing.
a priest. He really is.
And the thing that I thought was weird about that too was like, isn't that what Chains like? Wasn't Chains like teaching them to impersonate all these other priests and stuff?
Yeah.
Like why would he feel so weird about doing something in the name of Iono for the act? But I don't know. That part was a little weird, but I think it was meant to emphasize that Locke really was a believer in the Crooked Warden.
Yeah, I think it was like a last rites type of thing, and he felt if I don't do it to the god that I pray to, like I could be damning their soul maybe, and so he thought like, no, I have to tell the truth while I'm doing it.
Plus, I think he had a lot of respect for that, whatever his name was.
Caldrus, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I knew he was going to die right away. One of the first things I thought was, oh, they're planning all of this, the arc.
Right.
And then he's going to die and they're fucked. Yeah,
I was like,
I would agree. That's probably like the most like easily
guessed.
guessed plot point.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I was like, he's definitely going to die and they're going to be screwed.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, I have so in my general thoughts section here, I have the perfect quote to sum up this book. This web of lies was growing so convoluted, so delicate, and so branching that a moth's fart might knock it to pieces.
Yep, that's a good one.
Great one.
That's a good one.
Yeah. And then we talked about the wall of amusement, but I just want to reiterate, I think Lynch has a really great way of sharing like extra little stories and extra world building bits without it overstaying its welcome. And like the wall of amusement chapter was pretty long. Like that was a pretty good chunk. But I think overall he has a way of like just introducing like little things that you don't really need to know, but are just there to like fill out the world and make it feel so real. Like I think that the Gentleman Bastards world building is possibly some of the best I've read, just because it feels like each location really has its own unique like customs and superstitions and just like all of the little things that make up a society. I think he brings those out really well through his writing. And then real quick, two things we didn't talk about when we did the Liza Locke Lamora episode is what people have been saying forever is that the series name should have been The Lies of Locke Lamora, and the first book should have been The Gentleman Bastards.
Yes.
I'm like, that makes so much sense. Like, it makes so much sense for the series to be called The Lies of Locke Lamora, because that's what's happening in every book.
Mm-hmm.
So I just thought I would bring that up. And then the other thing is, I was listening to a podcast this last week where they were talking about the first book, Liza Locke Lamora, and they talked a lot about like Locke dressing up as a midnighter and going back and telling the Salvaras that they're being conned. And I just want to like reiterate or say that that was such a brilliant move. Like I loved that piece of writing where Locke just like not like double crosses them, but just like ensures that they aren't going to go to the police and like try to figure this out.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of also what Locke does in this book. He is working his way up the Sin Spire, and then eventually he gets noticed by Cylindri and Requin, and he's like, he like gets up there and he's like, I'm just gonna tell you guys, like, I was hired to break into your vault, but I don't want to do that. What I really want is a job. And just like he's telling them to their face, here's the con, like I'm showing it to you to distract you. And I think that's something that Locke is so good at.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's a trick that Scott Lynch can use in every book, but I think it's a really cool trick that he has up his sleeve and works really well. Yeah. What did you guys think about the whole Requin storyline? Was there like, did that do anything for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, it was really hard to like focus on any one because I felt like there was always like 5 or 6 different things going on at once. And I guess I feel like the theme of this book is there were a lot of stories I would have loved to focus on, and instead it felt like 5 stories mashed into one story. And
that's fair.
With each individual part, I was like, see, I want more of this, and just that I want to see them getting up the spire and conning and, you know, breaking into this safe even maybe, or maybe it was for something else. I thought maybe it was going to be that money waterfall that they were going to try to maybe rob in the end. There was just a lot of potential in a lot of the plot lines, and
yeah,
I wanted to know more about a lot of them, and that was just kind of a little disappointing.
Right.
Yeah, that's fair. I would agree with you, Sam. I would say, setting aside my disappointment of fulfilled storylines, though, I thought that the whole Requiem piece of this book was good. I enjoyed seeing them work their way up to Cinespire. I enjoyed seeing them, work their way into Requiem and what's his girl's name? Cylindri's confidence. I love the scene where they first tell Requiem and he puts his hand in this contraption and it opens this gate with a bunch of other triad hands and he says your hands are something or other.
Yeah.
And Locke has to start pulling out decks of cards and
that
by
was
the end
so
he's pulled
funny.
out,
he just kept pulling out more.
17 deck of cards and Requiem's okay, that's impressive. Yeah, I mean, it would have been cool to see it finish. It'd even be cool to get a little side story where they finish, or something. But overall, though, I enjoyed it. Just knowing that I knew it wasn't gonna, be a huge plot point, but to start them, I guess, on their journey and the Archon and Requiem's, I guess, they challenge each other, and that's why they're doing what they're doing, and so that was kind of cool too.
Yeah, I liked seeing how, Locke could go to Requiem and be he was playing both of them, right? He goes to Requiem and he's Stragos is doing this thing and he wants to take your vault and all this stuff, and he plays Requiem against Stragos.
Yep.
And then he goes to Stragos and he's well, Requiem's trying to do this.
Yeah.
I loved Locke playing middleman between the two of them.
Yep.
And then it was so brilliant at the end to get the actual council of the Priori involved. I thought it was a great maneuver, but I loved just the little moments where Locke is so convincing, he's so good at lying. Because he'll be in the elevator with Cylindri and he'll be really sincere, oh, Requiem loves you, and talking to her about he's I'm so sorry about what happened to you, and you're I'm just trying to be your friend, I'm not trying to be your enemy, I want to work with you guys. And it starts to she opens up to him just a little bit, not as much as Requiem, but she starts to trust him just a bit, and I loved that whole process of him working with them. And I was kind of man, it would be so cool if there was just alternate universe Locke that did work with them and became allies with them. That would be so cool.
I like the callback in the beginning when they're talking about, we have these liquor-soaked oranges from Camor, and you he's no.
Yeah, he's I don't want anything to do with those.
I thought that was a cool callback to the first book.
Yeah, that was great. We talked about Jean busting Locke out of his funk, and he's you gotta lock pick your way out and all this stuff and that whole thing. I love this quote. This quote between Jean and Locke. This is when Locke is in the prime of his mopiness and all that. And Jean says, I didn't save your goddamned life to sit in this goddamned hovel and pretend you're the man who invented grief. And Locke says, I hope a shark tries to suck your cock.
Yeah.
This is so good.
Yeah, those are so good. I saw another, the second quote on Deeper Discussion. That was another just funny wording that they used. That is part of the reason why I love the first book so much, was just their out of whack fucking, the way they talk is just so weird.
Are you talking about this one?
Yeah, that one right there.
Yeah. The two of Chalice, or here, I'll read it from the beginning. Yeah. This is at the beginning when they're sitting in the Sin Spire against the two ladies and they're looking at their hands of cards. And in Locke's head, the narrator voice is, aha, they were an astonishing... Locke looked down at his own hand. Aha, they were an astonishing constellation of crap. The two of chalices, worth precisely one wet shit from a sick dog in this situation.
It's just crazy to think that I'd never ever heard anybody say that before, ever in my entire life. It's just like completely something new that's just the best ever, dude.
Yeah.
I can't wait. I need to find a good time to use that seriously.
Right?
I know. This is
so
worth
funny,
precisely one wet shit from a sick dog.
Yeah.
Like, dude, it's so good.
I'm gonna use it
so
at some
good.
point.
Yeah. Oh man. And then there's a little bit of foreshadowing that I'll give to Sam here. So Jean mentions that Locke used to have a love of plays. And Locke says, "And you know what happened to it." And Jean says, "Sorry, I should have known better than to bring up that particular red-headed subject."
Yeah.
I wonder if we'll see a play in the future.
It was brought up like 2 or 3 times. Like, yeah, we were actors for a while, for a bit, for a short time. Like, so that was interesting. I was like, all right, that's definitely trying to tell me something here.
Yep.
I'm so
Stick
excited.
around.
Well, it also made me think of when they're going through that misty river.
Oh, yeah.
And Locke says, the voice is speaking in his head, and he's like, it knows my name. No, it knows my real name. Like the name that he himself didn't even know. So does that come back up later?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't even like to talk about Sabbatha because I am just so fucking frustrated and annoyed. And I'm like, okay, is she dead? Did she run off with another man? Like, what is... I feel like it's leading up to something so goddamn stupid. I'm going to be so annoyed by the, like, final reveal.
I don't know. I don't think it's stupid. I think you'll like it.
Okay.
And you'll know in a week.
Yeah,
sure.
in a week.
So.
But I just don't like something being brought up that frequently, and like we've just gotten nothing. Like absolutely nothing over 1,400 pages of reading, okay? I need a little bit more.
I will say now I was wrong about how soon the pirates came into play in this book, so I might be wrong about it for the 3rd book, but I'm pretty sure the Sabbatha stuff comes in very early in the 3rd book.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure. So yeah. Oh, I'm so excited to hear. I think I'm almost certain the 3rd book will be your favorite. It's not my favorite by like a pretty big margin, but I think the 3rd will definitely be your favorite. Yeah. So then, speaking of the Sinspire and like Requiem and all that, I love the story of Cylindri's face and like her injury.
Yeah. Yes, that is a very good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Especially
brutal.
The poison that they use, I can't remember the name of it, but I thought it was kind of an interesting thing, or maybe the substance, right?
It activated
a powder
with
that they
sweat.
put on, activated with moisture, with sweat, and then just burned like the sun.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, that's cool. I mean, it's fucked
brutal.
up. It's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing that the series does so well is painting everybody in a very human light. Even your bad guys are really morally gray, and like you feel for them in certain ways. And so you have Requiem, who's supposed to be like one of your villains, basically, right? But you get this backstory where he cared about Cylindri so much, and instead of like, you know, her getting hurt and him getting a new girlfriend or new wife or whatever, he continues to like very carefully like care for her and like nurtured her through the process of like healing from this burn and everything. And then he went to war for her and just started killing guys. Started killing people to find whoever did it. And just one by one, he was like picking off gang members. He's like, I'll stop killing when you get me some information. I'll stop killing when you get me information. And just like 1 a day, then 2 a day. He's like, I'll stop killing when you get me information.
Yeah.
And it's just, eventually somebody came, they're like, okay. Like,
Yeah.
it's so good. I love it.
Requin's ruthless, dude.
Yeah. He reminds me a lot of Marcone from the Dresden Files.
Oh, I could see that. I could totally see that.
Yeah. That's another series that you'll have to read being on the podcast now.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, yes, most definitely.
You will love the Dresden Files for sure. Just knowing what you like, you will love the Dresden Files. But yeah, I thought that was a great story, and I just loved the idea of Requin having this soft spot in his heart for Solandri, and I don't know, I just thought it was good. I liked it.
Yeah. Well, and then one of the final moments in the book is him like elevating her position greatly. So
yeah. So I had a question, because I feel like I used to understand this, and then reading it this time, maybe I was just like barreling through the end of the book and didn't catch it. But what was she promoted to? Like, I don't think I fully understood what she is now.
Like in charge.
Yeah, like
my guys, she was just gonna have a lot of power.
Yeah, I like I couldn't tell if she just has a seat on the Priori Council or if she's like the head of it somehow. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It just sounded powerful. That was
right. Yeah. Yeah, it sounded like she had like more responsibility, and is just able to enact change more.
Like stepping into the Archon's position without like actually being the Archon.
So yeah, it's got to be a seat on the Priori then, or maybe the head of the Priori, like you said. I can't remember. I wasn't able to finish that reread this time.
Sure. Okay, so then another bit of foreshadowing that I have at the very beginning of the book. Jean and Locke are talking about the Bonds Mage and how they can like take them down and stuff. And I forget who says what, but they say they must have their weaknesses. Might one of them have poor relations with his mother or be allergic to exotic foods? And I was like, oh, that's so interesting that you would say that. So I can't wait. We're going to have a lot of fun next week.
Yeah.
I loved, I know we've talked about this a little bit, but I loved Locke ordering the chairs. And just like, he's like, no, I need them now. And he just kept putting coins down.
Yes.
And
he's
the
like,
other
no,
guy
you need
was
to
like,
forget about your other clientele. Work on these now.
Every
but
time
sir,
he did
I
it,
have other people I'm building chairs for.
Sir,
no.
I can't.
It's money for, refunds. Tell them, your supplies have to come in, like whatever you have to do.
Yeah. And I loved how the narrator did it too for the audiobook. Like, he really made it sound like the guy that's making the chair. It sounded like he was in distress. Like,
yeah, he's freaking out.
Sir, I cannot. Like,
I can't do this.
It was such a good performance. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we get a little bit of world building. Did you guys catch this flashback with Chains and Locke that we saw in the first book, where it's like an extension of that scene from the first book, where Chains and Locke are leaving the floating grave right after Locke gets like the shark tooth in his mouth or whatever, and he tells Locke about how they betrayed this secret piece that Kappa Barsavi has set up. And he tells them that it's part of being a priest of the Crooked Warden. And I think this also shows that these guys aren't necessarily thieves first. Like, they're not conning the nobility because they're thieves. They're conning the nobility because it's actually part of their religion. Yeah. And he says the two tenets of the Crooked Warden is their job is to look out for other thieves and to hide them when they need hiding and make peace with them when possible, and also to humble the rich and remind them that they're not safe in their protected manors. And those are like the two rules of the Crooked Warden. And I thought that was so interesting. I don't know if I really caught that before. I was like, man, that's pretty interesting. That's actually part of their religion. I love learning about all the different gods in this book. Normally, that's not something I'm super interested in, but I think Scott Lynch does it really well. And then in that scene, Locke says, "And Barsavi doesn't need to know about this." And Jane says, "Bleeding shits, no." That's another great little.
Yeah.
And then the two tenants are actually called "Thieves Prosper" and "The Rich Remember." I thought that was kind of a cool little tagline. We talked about the Wall of Amusement. We see the Archon. He's got these what did he call them? They're like these engineers that can like make things that look realistic.
Oh, artificers or
artificers. Yes, exactly. And they're like in this boat going through his garden, and it all looks very real. But even Locke is like, there's something odd, like the trees aren't moving. There's no like breeze or anything. Yeah. And the Stragos is like, "I can make wind," and he like tells the people behind the scenes, he's like, "Give me wind," or whatever he does. He gives them some sign, and they like blow in all this wind. And I love what Locke says here. He's like, "Any man can fart in a closed room and say he commands the wind." Yeah. He's so just like quick. I love his quips. And then we get this scene later on, which is, I think, one of the funniest scenes in the series. And I'm gonna have to pull this up because I think I have it bookmarked actually. Nice. So this scene I consider like probably like for me the funniest scene in the book. It's kind of this very polite mugging. Where Locke and Jean are like hanging by these ropes on the cliff.
Oh yeah, that's a great scene.
And this guy at the top is just like, "Oh, hello, good sirs. How are you doing today? I'm just strolling by and trying to get your purses." And he's like, "I didn't find much up here. I assume you have something on you." And Locke and John are like, "Oh, hello, sir. Yes, we'll be right up with our purses. Just let us come to the side of the cliff." He's like, "Oh, I wouldn't let you do that now." Like
I'd much rather just cut you down and then climb down there. And Locke's like, "You have no way to get down there. I've lived here my whole life. I have a way to get down there."
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, it's this very, very polite conversation of like, "Oh, yep, I'm just mugging you right now, and that's what's gonna happen."
And even at the end, you know, like after like the whole thing happens and whatnot, and they get up there, and Locke is like, of course he's mad, but he's like, "Listen, you and I are brothers, okay?
Yeah,
we are the same freaking thing. Here's some silver. If I ever need you again, come back." So even at the end, Locke gave him a bag full of silver and said, "Go on your way."
Because I think the thing is, like, thieves, they can like respect, even if they're doing it to each other, they can respect what the other is doing because they're part of the same like fraternity of
and that was
thieves,
it. That's
right?
why Locke's like, "I can't blame you for doing what you did,
right?
But you fucked us, so I'm pissed. But here you go, you earned it."
Right.
I thought there would be a callback to that later because how it ended with him saying like, "If you ever hear this name," and so I thought there was going to be a callback to that.
Yeah, I think there's been a few things like that in these books, and I wouldn't be surprised if in like books 4 through 7 or whatever he's planning, if at some point we'll get like a callback to these guys, because I think at some point they're going to come back around to Camor.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't be surprised if they like went like across the world and came back through all of the places they previously visited, because they're setting up the Salvaras as enemies, because now they're the new spider. And they're setting up Cylindri and Requin as enemies. They have a grudge against Locke now. And then in the third book, you'll see a similar thing kind of happens. So I think they're setting up a lot of people to come back for the second half of the series and be like the big enemies that they take on. But I want to play a clip from the polite mugging scene just because I think it's so funny. I can't remember exactly where I placed the bookmark, so hopefully I placed it in a good spot. But if it's not getting to the point soon enough, then I'll just shut it down and we'll move on.
I hope you can find it because it's so good.
It's so funny, dude.
So good.
Never had no after name, sir. Trevor Vos Lamora is all. And you're a thief? A highwayman? Yes, I am. Nothing else? Do any honest work? No, not for some time now. Good. Then we are brothers of a sort. Look, my smelly friend, the thing you have to understand is that there is a 13th. He does have a priesthood, and I'm one of his priests. Savvy? If you say so. No, shut up. I don't want you to agree with me. I want you to use your misplaced acorn of a brain before the squirrel comes looking for it again. I have a blade at your throat. We're 70 feet above the ground, it's pissing a nice hard rain, and you just tried to murder me. By all rights, I ought to give you a red smile from ear to ear and let you drop. Would you agree to that? Oh, probably, sir. Gods, I'm sorry. Hush now, sweet moron. So, you admit that I must have a pretty powerful reason for not satisfying myself with your death. I guess. I'm a divine of the Crooked Warden, like I said. Sworn to the service and the mandates of the god of our kind. Seems kind of a waste to spit in the face of the god that looks out for you and yours, doesn't it? Especially since I'm not so sure I've been doing right by him recently. I should kill you. Instead, I'm going to try and save your life. All I want you to do is think about this. Do I still seem like a heretic to you? Oh God, sir, I can't think straight. Well, nothing unusual there, I'd wager. Remember what I said. Don't flail, don't kick, don't scream. And if you try to fight, even the tiniest bit, our arrangement's off. Wrap your arms around my chest and shut up.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. I love that scene. My favorite part of it is, hush, my sweet moron.
Yeah.
Like, he keeps trying to talk and like be like, oh, I'm so sorry, and Locke's like, no, just shut the fuck up, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't care about your sorries. Like, I love the I think I wrote it down. The he says, no, shut up. I want you to use your misplaced acorn of a brain before the squirrel comes back looking for it again. I'm like, that's such a creative insult.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's so good. So anyway, there's so many scenes throughout this entire book where I'm like, no, that's my favorite scene. No, that's my favorite scene. And I can never quite decide.
Yeah.
We get Locke on the boat and all this stuff. He like breaks these guys out of the jail and all this stuff, and we learn about Iono Stormbringer, who's another one of the gods, the Lord of the Grasping Waters. And I like this bit of world building where we learn what the superstitions of the water are, right? Like we learn you have to have women and you have to have cats. And I'm sure there's like a million other things, but those were like their two like non-negotiables. Like you have to have a woman on board and you have to have cats. And I think it's so funny that Locke forgets the cats.
Yeah.
and
then tries to fake his way through it for like what
No,
seems
they're
like
here.
weeks.
Yeah, they're
Yeah, no, they're here. I brought them on.
They're
for
just
sure.
shy.
They're
just
shy.
Yeah. And even Caldress is like, where the fuck are the cats? And he's
Yeah.
like, I forgot them in the shed. Like, oh my God. It's so good. It's so good. And then, so the book for me really picks up when they go on board of the Poison Orchid. And they're like out there in the rowboat they've been mutinied against.
Yep.
And they're out there in like this little tiny boat just like bobbing on the sea. And the Poison Orchid shows up. And they're like, take off your clothes and dance. And they start like shooting arrows at the boat and stuff to like make them like move. And there's a quote. What did they say? We ask for sabers and you bring out stilettos. And I loved the whole thing of them just having fun and like making fun of them and bringing them on board. And then like little by little, the whole scrub watch thing, like earning your right to be a part of the crew. And then the first time that whole thing comes across with the Jeremite Redeemers and like Locke being like, he's trying to earn some reputation back. and he's like, I want to be the first one off the boat.
Yep.
And so then he like jumps onto the Redeemer's boat, and just by pure like happenstance, he like stumbles into all these different fights that he wins.
Yeah. And doesn't John like also finish a lot of those fights too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly,
like John's like pretty much doing it for him, you know?
Right. Yeah. But it looks like Locke is.
Yeah.
And like there's one where he knocked over like a crate of like watermelons or something. I forget what it was. He's knocked over a crate of something onto these guys. And then one that I thought was really interesting, because I think it's easy to read the first book and be like, oh well, Locke doesn't really kill anyone. Like he's just like thieving, and it's like, no, he is not afraid to kill anyone. Like he gets the crate on those two Redeemers. They're like knocked back, and it says that he like coldly goes up to them and just like slits their throat. And he's like, he even says like it wasn't any like courageous battle, it was just thieves' work, just like cutting throats.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but he's not afraid to kill people. Like he's definitely not afraid to use that knife, which I think is really interesting.
You see that a lot with the assassins, that they don't know who's sending throughout.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
I liked when he got on the ship first, though, and he just realizes how fucked he is, so he laughs. And everyone thought he's like this madman, but he's like, no, I was just so scared shitless that like,
right. Yeah.
I just laughed.
Right. What did you guys think of like Zamira and Ezra, like our two people that we're interacting with a lot throughout the pirate section of the book?
They were probably two of my favorite like new characters out of everyone at the end.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed their stories. I was really sad when Ezra died, but I'm hoping we get more of Drakasha in the future.
Yes, Drakasha was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of hoping that Locke and Drakasha would kind of have
That's
a thing.
what I thought.
There was moments where it seemed like, oh, maybe they're going that direction, but
and then I was like, no, I don't think he'd want to give us like two love stories at the same time, when we especially still don't know what him and the whole Sabbatha cast is. So it just didn't feel like, as much as I wanted it, to like the right time for to happen, essentially, in the telling of the story.
Right. What did you guys think of the love story in this one? Do you think it was good, or?
I thought it was good. Yeah. No, I really enjoyed it. It was cool seeing Jean, you know, because we've had Locke's thing about the red-haired lady, right, that we've seen in the past, and you know, blah blah blah. So it's cool to see. It's cool to see Jean like kind of, because in my opinion, like I didn't see that happening with Jean. You know, he's kind of the big badass, like, you know, he's kind of he's the protector, like he keeps Locke safe, and that's his only mission. You know, I just want to keep my brother alive. So it's cool to see him kind of go out on his own and, you know, say fuck Locke in some circumstances. Instead, we're gonna, you know, fuck in this cabin, right? Like, fuck Locke, we're gonna do this, shit like that. So it was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely unexpected. But I mean, I feel like the story could have went so many ways if they'd kept her around. So her death really surprised me, especially when Locke and John are talking at one point, and he says, no, like, this is going to change things. Like,
right. That doesn't have to be a bad thing.
Worst, but things will change. So I was a little sad that was just kind of cut short. And I'm like, oh great, is book 3 just going to start out where Jean is now depressed for like the whole beginning, and it's Locke trying to pull him out, and do I want that same storyline again?
Yeah, that's fair. Fair.
We'll see.
I honestly, like, hand to God, cannot remember how the third book starts. I cannot remember the first like couple chapters of that.
I do, because that was part of my when I reread everything. I didn't finish the third book, but I got a huge chunk through it. But yeah, it's good, man. It's gonna be good.
Wait, have you never finished the third book?
No, I finished the third book several times.
Oh, okay.
This reread, I didn't finish it.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Just found it.
It's
pretty big though. It's about the same size as the other ones.
Yeah.
700 pages.
What was?
Don't you look at that last chapter, Sam. I see
I
you.
was looking at that page number it went up to. What page number?
You sneaky.
I just want to know.
Yeah. She's just like scanning for the name of Sabitha.
No, my problem is I have an issue where sometimes if a story really has me on edge about like, are they going to make it out? Like, will they succeed? Or if somebody has died and I'm like, no, they have to be coming back. I will sometimes like grab a book that I'm reading.
You got to find out. See, I think you and I are the same in that sense because it doesn't bother us. Like that. If you were to learn a huge plot point about the book, you could still read the book and enjoy all of the book, including that plot point, the same way you would before. I'm the same way. Yeah, Spencer is incapable of that. But spoilers, you could tell me exactly how a book ends, and I'll still read it and love it all the same.
Yes. I get really anxious when I'm reading, and sometimes something has me so worked up that I can't focus on anything, and all I'm thinking is, will they make it? Will they make it?
Yeah, and then the second you find out they do or don't, right, then you're like, okay, I can relax and go back to doing this.
I can enjoy this, which is why I a lot of times enjoy rereads much more than I still do the first book.
Yeah.
Because I can relax as I'm reading it because I already know and I can sit back and enjoy the details. But I get like, I'll look and I'll be like, are they alive? Does their name pop up back later?
Spencer, it looks like you are officially outnumbered, boy.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I said when we did, what was it? And you couldn't make it. And I was like, no, but it's always me and Gabe that agree on everything.
I think that was the last, Harry Potter, right?
It was Harry Potter. I was like, I need Gabe to back up everything.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. But yeah, I'm gonna get started on this tonight when I go make dinner after this. I'm just gonna get started on it.
Nice.
I love this quote that kind of happens. I think it's right after the Jeremite Redeemer thing. They're like pilfering the boat, and Zamira says to, and the reason I bring this up is because I think this quote shows what Scott Lynch does so well, which is he doesn't really. There are certain things that he has to explain, but there's other things that he trusts the audience to like figure out and to like understand. And I think this quote does a really good job of showing you that. Zamira says, "What do you have on board?" And then the guy, the old captain or whatever, says spices and wine. And then she cuts in and says, "And a fat load of Jeremite redeemers. No, shut up. You can explain later." And it's doing this thing where Lynch didn't say, "and a fat load of Jeremite redeemers." And then the captain tried to interrupt her, and then she said, like, it trusted you to understand from her line of dialogue, "and a fat load of Jeremite redeemers. No, shut up. You can talk later."
Yeah.
Like, you can put it together in your head that this other guy tried to interrupt and say, but. I think that's so cool that he like trusts his audience to interpret that, and he doesn't insult anyone's intelligence, really.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of cool. Oh, Regal the cat.
I loved Regal.
I'm not going to get attached to you.
Especially after he saw the cat that had been, what is it called? Like, not gentled? Or
gentled,
yeah.
Gentled,
yeah.
When he was getting the chairs, it almost felt in a way, he was so upset by seeing that kitten that had been gentled. And here's this cat just obsessed with him for whatever reason. He's telling it, "I'm not going to get attached to you. I'm not going to get attached to you." And then, he takes the cat in the end.
Of course he does. Yeah. How could you not?
Loved him having the cat at the end.
I was like, please let it be Regal and not just like another cat that he's
right.
He says it's Regal. I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
That was great for me. That was like a nice little, like bow at the end.
Right.
Oh, he brought Regal.
Yeah. Yeah, I love Jean's reaction to it when he's like, "I'm not getting attached to you. Find someone else to share your droll with." And then Jean comes around the corner. He's like, "Are you sure you're authorized to give orders to that cat?"
Awesome.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny.
So I loved the Port Prodigal bit. Like everything, like I love pirate towns. Like one of my favorite games of all time is Assassin's Creed Black Flag.
Yes.
And I love just like all the little pirate coves and pirate cities and stuff. I love that shit so much. And so I loved Port Prodigal.
I did
and
too.
Man, it was so good. Like, it was, I don't want to say it was my favorite part of the book, but it was a huge highlight of the book.
Yeah.
And I loved all the lore around it. Like, it's this badass town that you don't want to, like, mess around in. Like, you can easily die. Like, as they're pulling up to the shore, there's just, like, this dead body floating in the water. And
a bar that's, like, in a metal cage.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
they have, like, iron in front of the windows. It was so cool. And I love, before they even hop in the little dinghy to go out to Port Prodigal, Locke and Jean are trying to go along, and she's like, no. And she says, tonight is delicate business. Misstepping in Port Prodigal is like pissing on an angry snake. I need... And then Locke cuts in, he says, originally, we're from Camor. And then she, like, looks at him, and she's like, be on the boat in 5 minutes. Like, she knows that Camor is, like, this badass city where, like, it's the same thing. Like, it's so cool. But yeah, I love like Rance that was like sitting in Zamira's seat, and she like gets the shit kicked out of her. Zamira's like, they're like gonna do this drinking game, and Zamira's like, let's do it whatever style, and Rance is like, what's that? She's like, it's where you drink it through your fucking eyes, and like throws it in her face and then just beats the shit out of her. I was like, that is so cool. And then she gets her to the edge of the stairs and, like, kicks her down the stairs, and she just goes all the way down. I'm like, man, that was badass. That was so great. Cool.
And they were like, well, if your captain or whatever, sir, your leader had been smart enough to listen to the phrasing of the champion, you would know that it was fulfilled.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I loved Locke doing the con on the shipbreaker, where he dresses up as a noble, or like a baron, a Lashani baron.
Gets him a crazy good price. That was awesome.
Yeah, and he like keeps driving the price up, and when it gets to the point where he knows that the baron probably isn't going to put in any more money, he just goes, fuck you, old man, and like walks away. And just, I'm like, oh, this is such a good con. It's so good.
He said at first, he like said it in a way of like, it was getting a little too high, like getting too close to what he couldn't afford first. I love that scene. That was great.
Yeah. I'm like, what a brilliant... And I love the way that, like, Zamira and Ezri have basically just been forcing their way through these ships, like taking over other ships and getting their cargo, and bringing Locke and Jean in, add this extra layer of like subterfuge where like the shipbreaker thing, and then even later when they're getting into that like island party or whatever that was, where they go up on the shore of like this very rich people's part, like the nobility party or whatever, and they start taking everything. They have Locke show them how to get in disguise, and he like goes in with them and like gets them through the door, whereas before they might have just rolled up beside it and shot their cannons at the place. Like, I think it was cool that Locke brought in like an extra depth of like, no, we don't need to go in. Yeah, we don't need to go in guns blazing. Like we can do things like a little trickier. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Port Prodigal has these Eldrin stones that surround the harbor.
That was interesting. And do we ever get more of the Eldrin? And this is
not so far.
Not yet.
I'm trying to think, what's the other book we read? The Will of the Many, where you've got this tech that is coming from a time where something happened and there's no info between. And that is actually a very big part of the Way of Kings, Stormlight.
Right.
You know, so I thought that was interesting, and I'm like, I need like a prequel to tell me about
that would be cool.
Those times and what was the cause of the end of them that left you know, all of this random stuff behind.
For sure. Yeah, I definitely hope we see it. I don't think, unless I'm mistaken, I don't think we really get anything in the third book that tells us much about the Eldrin. But I'm sure it's a plot point that he's going to dive into later on, especially with how the third book ends. And so I hope that we see more of the Eldred stuff, because so far we've seen like these big glass towers, and then we see Zamira's like chainmail, like her Eldrin glass vest that can't be pierced, and it's like we can't bind the pieces of Eldrin glass together, and so we had to attach links on the back of it and attach it some other way to this vest that we made. I'm like, that's really cool. And then the stones, it just says, there's like these stones underneath that are like these Eldrin stones, and we don't know why they keep everything else out, but they do. Like, nothing can cross it besides like human ships.
Did it ever make you wonder if like maybe it was also had a purpose to keep out whatever that thing in the mist is?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was on that side.
Yeah, I want to know more about that.
Yeah, those things.
The thing in the mist is crazy. It's kind of like, it makes me think of sirens,
Yeah.
And so that's cool.
Yeah. I love that kind of weird lore where it might be mystical in a way, or just ghosts or something like that, malevolent spirits. I don't know. I liked that. I wanted to know more about those islands, and how they said only 3 can be inhabited now. The rest, like, if you step on it, no one's going to see you again. And I wanted a little more of that.
Yeah, for sure. There was even moments where there was just like weird things in the water. There was one where Caldrus was telling Locke, he's like, oh yeah, they're kind of like fish, but they're like spirits or whatever, and like they don't really bother us or whatever. And then there was another moment when they're on Zamira's ship, and there's like this giant fish behind them, and it's just like lurking like behind their ship. And Locke's like, should we be worried? And she's like, no, it's fine. Like, he's just following us.
Did you like when he said something to her, like, they're having the conversation, and Locke is like, how do you do this? How do you... I think it was during that conversation, like, how do you live with, like, these things following you around? She goes, I'm sorry, on land? Is there, like, some immortality where you never worry about death in any way? And I thought that was really poignant. Like, I was like, I liked how she, like, kind of put him in his place with that, like, oh, I'm sorry. If you're on land, does that mean
like it's no different.
Yeah.
You still have the same dangers and challenges. Maybe different, but they're there.
You're still in danger at all times. So I really liked that part.
Yeah, that was a great conversation, and I think it came at a perfect time, because if you're a first-time reader, you're reading it and you're like, wait, she's got kids on this ship and they're like taking over these other ships? Like, what? Like, that's kind of crazy. And then like that conversation, like, I don't know if it necessarily excuses bringing kids on like a pirate ship, but it adds a little bit more context to like how she thinks about it. Like, no, if you're on land, mobsters could come by your house and throw Molotov cocktails in there. Like, there's all sorts of stuff that could happen. Yeah. And so I thought that was the perfect time to have that conversation, I think. So there was more that I liked about the Port Prodigal bit. I liked Zamira talking to the council about her plans, and seeing that there's kind of this council of like the biggest pirates, and they all have to agree on this thing that she's about to do, and they have to agree to a treaty of non-interference. And then we see that Rodolfo breaks that treaty, and he's like, well, I'm gonna go like take her down. And it sucks because that is actually the guy that was at the dinner table with them, that was quoting Lucarno with them. And that's why it's such a nasty betrayal. It's like, oh my god, like that sucks.
And you could have just said no at the meeting.
Right.
I didn't understand if it was like him trying to cover it up as a way to be like, no, I supported her no matter what, and now I could go out and kill her and people won't think it was me because I backed her.
Right. Yeah, that was tough. And like even the conversation he has with his first mate when we're in his POV, and they're like, well, can we ride up to her and pretend like we're just like saying hi, or like we need information or whatever? And he's like, no, I've come too far and traveled for too long to come kill a friend. He's like, if I'm gonna do it, I have to go straight ahead and just start firing.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, he actually like considers her a friend. This is something that he like believes he has to do, but it's so misguided.
Yeah.
And then also in that council meeting, Zamira brings up that the boys are poisoned, which Ezri is finding out for the first time. And there's this great quote where Ezri tells Jean to come back to her cabin, and they're gonna have a talk. And she's basically saying like, "How could you not tell me? Like, like this one thing." And she says, and the audiobook is so good at this. I wish I had bookmarked it, because it's a guy doing it, but her performance, like in the audio, but the performance of her is so good, and it has so much passion in it. And she says, "You are the only thing," she whispered through the iron grip of her embrace, "the only thing on this whole fucking ocean that's mine, Jean Tannen. I don't own this ship. Hell, I don't own this cabin. I don't have a buried fucking treasure. I have no family and no title, not anymore. And then I finally got to take something in return. And it turns out that I have one significant flaw. We can do something," she said. "We can find someone. Physicers, alchemists. Try it, Ezri. Alchemists and poisoners. We need the antidote from Stragos, or an actual sample of his poison from which to create one. And I didn't deserve to know. What if you'd drop dead here one night, Ezri? What if the Redeemer had put his sword through my skull, or the crew had just murdered me on the day we met?" And I don't know where I'm going with this quote, but I love this conversation so much because it's so impassioned of like, it's very reminiscent of the conversations that Locke and Jean have, where it's like, no, you're not going to give me the antidote. I'm going to give you the antidote. And like that whole like very protective of each other kind of passionate conversations. And I just think, I think it was done so well. I love that first bit where it's like, I don't own anything. Like, you are the only thing I have that is actually mine. Yeah, just such a great little bit of conversation there.
I thought it seemed a little sudden, though. I remember being taken back and being like, "Oh, you guys are like in love? Like, hasn't it been 3 days?"
I think it's more time than we think it is. I think it's because I think there's like weeks that go by that we're not seeing.
But
because
it couldn't have been more than 2 months, which it would have to be
that's
less
true.
Still is fast.
Yeah, that is true.
I don't know, it just caught me off guard a little bit. I didn't really realize that they were like in love, like that. They were talking in absolutes that, we're together, you're mine, which was much more obvious after that fact. But I don't know. I guess like the lead up to it felt mostly like just sex to me. So I was surprised by it, but not in a bad way. I was just like, I was like, this is much more serious than I had thought it was.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. I think that on a reread, going back, like knowing that they're in love and then going back and reading it again, it's more like palatable for me. But yeah, I wonder if I thought the same thing the first time I read it, because I typically have the same reaction to stuff like that. But I don't know, maybe it was just like a super passionate thing. And then we talked about the prologue scene that we see later. Oh wait, actually, I have one more quote about that scene where they were talking. They have like this intense argument, and they're like clutching each other tight. They tell each other that they love each other for the first time. And Ezri says, if there is no way, make a way. Losers don't fuck in this particular cabin.
I like that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's a great quote. Oh, this is a great quote. I just think it's not like super funny or anything. I just think it's a great piece of writing on Lynch's part. It reminds me a lot of something that like Patrick Rothfuss would write. And it's when Zamira is pretending to be like a servant or something, and they're like boarding that other boat. And it says, The guard was no doubt flustered by the sudden emergence 2 seconds later of a crossbow quarrel's point from his sternum. Zamira wondered if he had time to speculate on the location of the rest of the bolt before he collapsed, the upper and lower portion of his spine no longer on speaking terms. And I'm just like, wow, that is such like a fluid, just yummy piece of writing. I'm like, It just sounds like I probably didn't do it justice, but like it sounds so good.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, and then we get the huge fight on the ships. Do you guys want to talk about this, like the big battle at the end where they get boarded by Rodolfo? Any thoughts?
Go ahead, Sam. You're probably fresher than I am on it.
I mean, it was interesting. I wasn't sure how they were going to get out of it. I definitely wasn't expecting the whole flaming ball thing and Ezra to die, and that was really hard. I don't know if I'm being brutally honest, because I was like in such a time constraint to finish this book, and it was a first read for me, so I had to get it done. That by the end, I was kind of just like, "Oh my god, come on!" Like,
right,
yeah.
I just wanted to like finish the book. Not that it was bad. It was like I literally finished 15 minutes before we started. So I
get that.
Being like, "Oh my god, how many more things are we going to fit into the last like 50 pages of this freaking book?"
Right,
and then we're going to kill off a character that I thought had been planted in a way that she was going to be
stick around,
future stories. I don't know. I feel like with all of the plot lines that were going on, that at that point in the story, the last thing I needed was a pirate double crossing. Pirate.
That's so true.
I was just like,
it's just
right.
one too many.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
But I think on like a reread, I would probably dig down into the details more. But I think I was almost not scanning, but just like, all right, okay. At that point, I was like, just get me to the original plot lines, like end game.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think on this read, I don't think I ever realized like how big of a fight it was. Like this fight was going on for a long time. And in the first book, we got like some fights, but they were more like alleyway skirmishes.
Brawls, yeah.
And this was like a fight. Like this
war.
was like a straight up like battle. Mm-hmm. And I was surprised. I think I just listened to this part this morning, and I was surprised at how good Lynch is at writing action, because it wasn't something that I'd really thought of as like a specialty of his. Like when I think of Scott Lynch, I think of like characters and dialogue and like story, like plot beats. Like I don't really think about like him writing like these big action scenes. Mm-hmm. And when I was listening to it this time around, I was like, wow, this is actually like a pretty damn good action scene. Like I actually like this quite a bit. And so, I liked that a lot. And then we talked about, Ezri dying. And I loved this moment from Jean when he has the person that threw the orb over, and he's like stabbing him in the back over and over and over. And Locke comes over. He's like, Jean, stop. And he like pulls him away. And Jean just says, it doesn't help. Gods, it doesn't help. And Locke is like,
a very real quote, like a very real, like you think this is going to somehow lessen your pain, and no, it's not helping.
Yeah. And Locke's just like, I know it doesn't help. I know. And then that's when he turns on Locke. He's like, why didn't you stop her? He's like, she pushed you into me. She knew what we would do. Yeah. And then Jean just realizes that he's been berating this guy who had nothing to do with the death of his love. And he's like, "Oh, gods, forgive me." And it was just a great, like a sad scene, but just a great scene. Mm-hmm. And it was one of the scenes that made me be like, maybe this is my favorite scene in the book. Like I don't know, like it was just written so well. Like everything from the action to Ezri dying and the aftermath afterwards, like it was just all so like perfectly planned out and perfectly paced, to where it like, it got some significant emotion out of me. So And then Locke tells Zamira his real name, and so does Jean. He's like, you can't go through what we've been through and not know our real names. And so they tell her, and that's like really significant, especially when you remember that if somebody has your real name, they can do serious damage to you. If they give that to a bonds mage or something, like, you're screwed. But also we know that Locke Lamora isn't really his real name.
Yeah.
Well, apparently he only just learned it, what his real name is in this book. We weren't told it, but when the thing's whispering to him, he's like, no, it knows my real name. And I was like, oh, is he going to say it? And then he didn't say it. That was so upsetting to me.
Yeah.
These books, like book 1 and book 2, like, I think the plot made more sense and moved much smoother in book 1.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed much more of, like, individual scenes.
Yes,
that's fair.
That's exactly
Totally.
my point. Yep.
Totally.
Yeah, so I'm kind of torn in
It's
which
a hard
one I like more.
Yeah, it's a tough decision to decide between the two, because
but
they're
I enjoy
both
them both. I enjoy them for very different reasons.
right. Yeah, like book 2 is just kind of like a ADHD adventure. Like, it's just like
That's what I sound
all
like.
over the place, going to
When
all
you
these different
don't
things.
take your meds, ADHD.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And luckily,
I love that. That's like the perfect way. Like,
yeah,
unmedicated ADHD.
yeah,
Here's like 3 or 4 weeks of their life. You know?
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
It's a mess, but here it is.
Here
Yeah,
it is. They're just, taking it moment by moment, just trying to get through the day.
and that's the other interesting thing about this book is I think in book 1 they start out so strong where they have a lot of like independence and a lot of say over what they do, and they're like really driving the plot forward.
Mm-hmm.
And in this one they're really weak, and the plot is like happening to them and like sending them every which way.
Yes.
And so it can throw readers off a little bit when you're used to them in the first book, like driving everything forward and being like the biggest predator in the jungle, right? Yeah. And then in here, it's like, oh man, they really are under someone's thumb. And I would say it's kind of the same in book 3. Like, you'll have a child timeline that is, it's not like this where there's like a million stories. There's like 2 stories. There's the child timeline and there's the present timeline, and it's just across the board one story. And the child timeline gives you the feeling of book 1 Locke Lamora, where he's really in control, and then the future timeline is kind of the thing where he is like not in control at all.
Yeah.
And so it kind of gives you the best of both worlds. I'm really interested to see where everyone lands on it, because I think about book 3 and I'm like, I love book 3, but it is not my favorite of the 3. So yeah, I'm really interested to see where we all land on it.
That was put really well, Spencer, where Locke is basically like in control. He's the puppet master through all of book 1 for the most part. And in book 2, no, he's the marionette, and his strings are being pulled. And not only are his strings being pulled, but he's also struggling with like not being the one in control really anymore.
Right.
I like that. That's really kind of put some things in perspective for me right there. On why I liked one book a little maybe more than the other. I think I liked book 1 a little more.
Sure. Yeah, that's totally fair.
A little bit. Just the way the story was told, but I think I enjoyed the elements and little stories that were in book 2 better.
Sure. Yeah, that's super fair. Ezri's funeral was really great. I loved Locke being like, we give this one to the Crooked Warden. He does this whole like Crooked Warden thing, and then he throws Iono in there as well. He says a prayer to Iono, like, please accept Ezri into your waters and all that. And I love this moment, and maybe it was just because it sounded really good in the the performance in the audiobook or whatever, but I just love this line where Locke is like, doing his Crooked Warden thing, and he's like, we begrudge you this one, and I don't mind saying so, because he like never really talks bad about the Crooked Warden, like he's never like disrespectful to the Crooked Warden, and so I like this moment where he's like, I'm holding this one against you. It was just like really, really great.
Yeah. I listened to a little bit of the audiobook of this one, A, because you had said like it was really good, and B, because I was in such a time constraint at one point that while I showered today for this, I purchased the audiobook so I could listen to it while I was showering. And it reminded me of the last time I listened to, well, this wasn't like a graphic audio, or is that the right word for it? Like the Night Angel ones I watched. I experienced the same issue where I listen to my books at 2.2, and anytime someone does an accent in the reading of an audiobook, I almost cannot understand anything that's being said.
See, if you're at the point where you're at 2.2 and you're not understanding it, I don't think you can use one speed across all books. I think you need to like slow it down for certain books and speed it up for others. Like there's some books where I'm like, even at like 1.5 speed, I'm like, this is going way too slow, and so I'll bump it up to like 1.7. But I think you'd probably be able to do a lot more with audiobooks if you slowed it down from 2.2.
I can't. It's because any slower than like the slowest I can probably go is like 1.7 or whatever, because anything slower and I just my mind wanders. I have ADD in the sense that like I get lost in my own thoughts all the time. So
1.7 is a good speed though. Yeah.
It's a good speed. I was reading and listening at one point, and to keep up with the way that I read on audio, I had to get up to 3.3. So if that gives you any indication of,
that's how fast you read.
350 pages today. You know what I mean? I like speed read, but like I have a problem where my brain goes 1,000 miles an hour, and any slower, I lose my train of thought and I start thinking of other things. It's annoying. It's really annoying.
It's annoying, but at the same time, it's also kind of cool.
Yeah.
I wish I could read and comprehend at 3.3 times speed. That would be the coolest fucking thing ever.
My girlfriend loves to send me reels of the videos where it's like someone making fun of like buddy reading with a friend, and they're like, where are you? Are you done? And they're like, I've already read 4 books, you know, and you're book 1. And I'm like, yes, that is me with you.
Yeah.
Like, it's a blessing and a curse.
Well, we're kind of at the end here. We could probably talk about the end as a whole, because there's a lot of things that all kind of happen at the same time and link in together, or like kind of mesh with each other. So we kind of get Locke coming back just to handle everything in the Tel Varar area. And he's got Stragos on one hand, he's got Requin on another, and then he's got kind of a third party, the Priori, even though Requin is like part of the Priori, but he needs to get the Priori on board before he fucks over Requin, because they're part of the same team. And so we see him go to this manor, and he like convinces them, he's like, hey, I'm taking down Stragos tonight, I can distract him while you guys basically finish him off. And they're like, okay. And so they make this whole plan, and I kind of liked it. Were you following this at the end, Sam, when he was like making all these different moves?
There were just so many things going on at that point that it was like, I know I'm not going to fully understand this on a first read in general. You need to go back and see how it was set up. But when they break into the Priori's room, and it was almost like the straw that broke the camel's back, where it was like, I don't even know where this is coming from, who this guy is, why you're breaking in this old man's bedroom, and then you're going to use the Priori to back you getting the Archon like out of power. I'm not gonna lie, it didn't make that much sense to me. In that I didn't feel like there was enough build up to get me there.
Yeah, I think so. They kind of talk about it earlier in the book, how there's like these two political parties basically.
Yeah.
And how the Archon like took over and whatnot. But he needs to the whole book, I think the point of that scene was that the whole book, him and Jean are thinking, how do we get back at the at the Archon? But this whole time, there's been this other party that wants to take him out, that they just haven't been thinking about. It's not on their radar at all. They haven't investigated them. But then they have this idea. They're like, wait, no, there's this other political party that's been around for the whole book. Like, why are we not interacting with them and trying to team up with them to take down Stragos? Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of what that scene was, where they're going in, they're like, we're not trying to kill you, we're not trying to hurt you, we're just trying to get you on our side to take down Stragos.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what that was. They needed them to, like, Stragos's men were going to pick Locke and Jean up from the Sin Spire, but instead they had the Priori's men come kill them and take their clothes and pretend to be them, so that when Locke goes and does his stuff, his final thing at the Sin Spire where he takes the paintings and everything, mm-hmm. he comes back, everyone in that carriage is not Stragos's men. They're all the Priori.
Yeah, so, I got it. It just felt like it came out of nowhere.
Yeah, I can understand.
It didn't feel like there was enough build up to it.
Yeah, that's fair. I think it's definitely it's definitely something that happened at the last minute, and I don't know if that was by design. I think it would have been cool if they had like baked that into the plan from the beginning.
Or there had been more discussions with them, more contact in some way. It just felt like out of left field. It wasn't bad. I just think it should have been peppered into the story a little more. So
yeah,
when I look at the story from the beginning to end, how could I have ever guessed that that would be the outcome?
Right, yeah, there's no way. It's kind of I wouldn't quite call it a Deus Ex Machina, because technically they're there from the beginning, but it kind of feels like one a little bit. So, and at the end of the day, for an author, it's like it doesn't really matter if technically you set something up. It matters like how the reader feels about it. It matters like what the what the perception of the thing is, more than what it actually is. And that's true in everything, like business and everything. Like for a business, it's like it doesn't matter that you like technically didn't fuck over your customers. It matters that that's the public perception, right? Yeah. Like it so there is quite a bit of truth there. But I did think it was interesting, because the whole book you're wondering, what are these chairs? Like what? Like it tells you that there's something hidden in the seats of the chairs, but you don't know what it is. And so you're like, is it going to be a knife that he's going to pull out and like kill Cylindri with, or what? And at the end you see that it's like a coil of rope and like these lines that they to fit the thing in. I'm like, oh, that was pretty cool. Like I liked him like breaking apart the chairs and like getting all his stuff out of it. I'm like, that was pretty smart, because he had no way to like bring that stuff up to the office.
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting how it all worked out, because the whole plan, I would love to know if Stragos wasn't a problem at all throughout the whole book. I would love to know what their original plan was, because it seems like their entire plan hinges on getting Requiem out of his office and them being alone in there. And so it's like, I wonder how they would have originally done that, because in this situation it was like they had someone to like pick them up at the bottom and like arrest them or whatever. So I thought that was pretty cool. And they like tied up Cylindri and took the paintings, and they found out they're fake.
Yeah, that was woof. Like, really? Man. All of this and they were fucking fake?
Right. Yeah, that is tough. That is like, imagine working for 2 years on something and putting all this effort in, and it destroys your life, it kills someone that you love, and all this stuff, all for your scheme. And you could have walked out of the Sin Spire with more money. Like, you could have taken your winnings from the Sin Spire and had more money than you got for the paintings.
Well, I thought it was interesting, like, I believe in the beginning of the book when the Archon first grabs Locke, and he says, like, you can, like, pull money out of thin air. It is not about the money for you. You are a type of man who always needs to be scheming and pulling one. And I thought that was, like, a really good read on Locke as a person, because I've thought that so many times where I'm like, why are you doing this? Like, you can only be doing this because you enjoy the chaos and the uncertainty, and you don't want comfort. That would be boring for you, which I don't understand.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think that's the cool thing about the Gentleman Bastards, right? Is like right now, obviously they need money, but for the most part, they do it for, like, the love of the game rather than, like, oh, we just want to be super rich. Like, they just love stealing.
Yeah.
So then we get this scene where Locke is in front of, he's like in the gardens or whatever. Him and Jean are in the gardens with the Archon, and the Archon basically tells him, like, you're gonna die, like, right now. Like, we're just gonna kill you. And this is when the Archon's eyes that got switched out with the Priori, like, deception people, they, like, knock the Archon out, and then they grab the they, like, tie the Archon up. They're like, we're gonna take him to Zamira, and then they grab the alchemist, and they're like, you're gonna tell us exactly how to do this. He's like, I only have one. They're like, well, we're taking you with us, and you're gonna show us how to make another one, because he's like, it's only in my head. That's the only place I have the recipe. And they're like, okay, well, you're coming with us. And then Moraine, whatever her name is,
Moraine, I think that's how I read it.
Yeah, Moraine. She moves super fast, and she kills the Priori eye that was next to her, and then she kills the alchemist. She runs, like, a poison blade along his neck and makes him, like, foam at the mouth. And so they only have the one antidote right now. And then I forget, I think she, like, jumps off the thing, or she, like, flees somehow. And it's just like, oh my god, the only person that knew the antidote, the only person that could possibly heal them, is now gone. And there is a hint, I'm not going to say what it is, but there is a hint pretty early on in the book, after they get poisoned by the Archon. There is a hint as to who could possibly cure them. But the and then she, like, knocks the antidote out of Locke's hands, and he just happens to, like, grab it again. And Jean, as he's fighting with Moraine on her way out, she rips her sleeve, and it reveals a tattoo of a vine around a sword. And this isn't any imagery that we've seen so far, and I'm going to have to pay attention to book 3 to see if we see anything of it there, because I don't think we do. But I wouldn't be surprised. It seems like she very much has her own goals. Like, it seems like she's part of another faction that we haven't met yet. And so I'm really interested to see what comes of that. And then I love this moment where they bring Stragos to Zamira, and Jean says, Ezra Del Mastro, I give you the Archon of Tel Vara, as their offering or whatever, like their thieves offering. I thought that was so good. And apparently Zamira and him used to be a thing, and I think that I can't remember if it says it in the books or if it was in, like, an interview or something, but people are pretty certain that he is the father of her children.
I don't think they say it. I feel like I would have remembered that.
Yeah, but they were definitely, like, together. Like, they were definitely, like, like, in love or whatever. But Yeah, I think I just love this whole thing where she's like, yeah, we're going to keep you in the bottom of the ship in complete darkness, all tied up in a ball, and you're going to go crazy and you're going to scream and we're going to find it, music to our ears and all that. And I'm like, oh, this is brutal. Like, they're just going to keep him in the dark bottom of the ship forever. And it was just so great. So then, yeah, they say goodbye to Zamira, and then does anybody want to talk about the about like that final scene about the antidote and all that?
It was expected to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what I expected. Locke to secretly trick Jean into taking it. So
yeah, I love that scene so much because it's like Locke even says like, you were gonna do the same thing to me, like because Jean, they had like their meal or whatever, and Jean's like, I'm gonna force you to take it. He's like, you can't stop me. I'm gonna hold you down and like force you to drink the antidote. There's nothing you can do about it. And Locke's like, well, actually, you've already, drank the antidote. He's like, I don't know why you let me pour your wine glass, but that's, you've already drinking it.
Yeah.
And Jean starts to get mad. He's like, you were going to do the same thing. Like, you were literally going to force me to do it. I just outsmarted you and made you drink it. And it's just this moment that shows like they are so selfless towards each other, and there's nothing that they won't give up for the other. And I think that's why this book does such a good job at showing their friendship and showing like how incredibly loyal they are to each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I love that. I love the quote where Jean yells, "You bastard!" and Locke says, "Gentleman bastard." and then Locke puts the antidote in Jean's glass well ahead of time. And then Jean, it's an interesting conundrum, right? Because Jean has lost the love of his life or whatever recently, and he says, her and now you, is that supposed to be like a favor to me? And Locke says that Jean saves his life all the time. Let me do it for you just once because you actually deserve it. And Jean says, I want to hug you and tear your God's damned head off all at once. And then Locke says, that's the definition of family, near as I can tell. And I'm like, great. It's a great way to end the book. It's a great way to end the book. And them just kind of like sailing off to who knows where.
Yeah.
Now Jean has his antidote. And I guess we can go into final thoughts. Jean has his antidote and Locke is without it. And they're probably already 2 weeks in to having their last dose, or at least for Locke having his last dose of like the thing that temporarily puts that stuff away. And so I don't know, do you have any thoughts on the ending, Gabe? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, everything that's been said's kind of already been said. I'm not it's hard for me to, I feel like, to say that because I know it's going to happen. So at least in the third book. And so I guess I could say if I didn't know, I would definitely be excited to figure out what happens to Locke, and all that stuff. But
Okay.
Yeah, I'm ready to go sit down and start the third book so I can make answers. That's my final thoughts. Is I'm ready to go on to book 3.
Do you have any theories? Do you have any like thoughts of what might be in the third book? Besides
I really
Sabbatha?
don't, because book 2 took such a hard left that I don't think it's
so
really
abnormal.
I don't think it's possible. Sorry, I just saw a budget truck pull up in front of my house and stop, and no idea what they're doing here, and it threw me off. But yeah, book 2 just took such a hard left turn that no, I don't. But I think I will have a lot to say the next time we talk about book 3, because I'll be fully up to date, and I will either be able to rage about Sabbatha's reveal or be very happy about how it was drawn up. That's my final thoughts.
Cool. Nice. Yeah, I am excited to get into it, and I think I'm I'm more excited to hear your thoughts on it than I am to like actually read it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm excited to read it, but
Yeah, no, I would probably agree with that. It's going to be
Yeah.
exciting to hear a first-time reader.
Yeah, I can't wait. Can't
Cool.
wait.
All right. Well, we will get out of here. This was super fun hanging out and talking about this book. This has been a long time coming. So if nobody knows, the first year, I think it was honestly episode 5 of the podcast. It was well before Gabe had ever read Lies of Locke Lamora. I got our other co-host, Chris, to read it. And he sat down with me for an episode on the first book, and then he never read the other 2. And I've been waiting to talk about this book literally for 3.5 years now or whatever. So it's been a long time coming. For
Awesome.
Sure. All right, everyone. Well, that is going to wrap us up for today. Be sure to chat with us in the comments about Red Seas Under Red Skies. We've gotten so many great comments lately on various videos about what certain series like Harry Potter or The Gentleman Bastards mean to all of you guys. And it's always a huge just boost to my day to hear from you all. If you want to reach out directly, our social media stuff is in the description, as is our Patreon, where you can watch these episodes live as we record them and even get completely exclusive content there. I think what is coming up is some more Harry Potter episodes. I'm not sure if the Harry Potter episode will come out before or after this one, but we'll definitely be doing the next the next Gentleman Bastards book to kind of finish out this series. And then we'll be going into Stormlight Archive very shortly after that, after a couple of Creators Corner type episodes. They may not necessarily be like specifically Creators Corner, but they'll be more like off-topic or topical conversations where we're just hanging out and talking with a guest or something. So be sure to tune in for that. And then once we hit Stormlight, I don't think we'll be doing like back-to-back Stormlight, but we'll probably do like Stormlight, Harry Potter, and then maybe like some other books like Ninth House or something. We'll find some other things to read. But yeah, that's a lot of content coming up. This is probably the most scheduled out and planned out we've been for a while. So be sure to hit subscribe, notifications, all that. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, remember that any man can fart in a closed room and say that he commands the wind. And I'm going to go command the wind myself.
Nice.
Oh my god.
That's a good one. That's up there. That's up there on one of the other your scale of endings. That's up there.
And a big shout out to Caitlin. Thank you so much for backing us at the Green Bone tier.